there's a lot of times in a race where I could go faster, but I choose not to.
Aloha, and welcome to SUP FM, the podcast for stand-up paddleboarders everywhere. So with no further ado, let's get out on the water and on with the show. Here are your hosts, Nick and Simon.
Episode 6 with Chase Kosterlitz, and we had a fantastic interview with him today, Nick, or rather you did.
Yeah, it was great. He's such an easy guy to chat to. He's really, really forthcoming.
And lots of very strong views as well.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed the part where he got into the racing and told us exactly what it felt like to be out there in the draft train on the Carolinas Cup. And he's been paddling for 4 years professionally, so he's certainly had his fair share of firsts all around the world, not just in the USA, which is great to see how broad-minded he is, having travelled a fair amount.
Absolutely, and listen out for Chase's pre-wedding preparation. That's fantastic, a fantastic way of preparing for your wedding, revealed exclusively to us on SUP FM.
And you can check those out in the show notes as well, www.supfm.com/006.
Excellent. Right, let's hear from Chase Kosterlitz.
Well, welcome to Chase Kosterlitz. It's great to have you on the SUP FM podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's great. We're really excited. And we'd just love to get straight in. And my best question is I'd love to know how you felt the instant you jumped on your first paddleboard. Where was it and how did it feel?
That's a good question. I know where it was. It was in St. Pete Beach, Florida. And it would have been about 2006, but honestly, I cannot remember like the very first instance that I got on it. I definitely remember like the first few times, but I can't remember like that first exact time, or at least not vividly. But it was in St. Pete Beach, Florida, and I was a kiteboarding instructor at the time and heavily into kiteboarding. I was a sophomore in university. There, and our kiteboarding club got a couple of the first stand-up paddleboards available in Florida at the time, I guess, and we would just mess around on them, you know, like I had never seen another stand-up paddleboard, and we sort of just took them out when there was no wind for kiting, and if there was this tiny wave on the Gulf of Mexico, we would surf them, but maybe I paddled, you know, kind of sporadically on the board, you know, once a month, if even that, you know, just kind of like if you just had a toy laying around and whenever you're bored, you jumped on it. But that was sort of my first foray. But I definitely remember enjoying it, you know, but really if you ask me, you know, then if I'd be here now talking to you guys or doing some of the things I'm doing with the sport, it would have been hard to imagine.
Yeah, because there couldn't have been a sport at all in 2006. I mean, it must have been just sort of a freakish thing that people did on the water.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's, I guess, the best way to describe it is I didn't really look at it as I didn't know there was racing. I don't think people were formally racing at that time. But yeah, it was just kind of like if you had a toy laying around, it was like, okay, you know, let's take this out and sort of play on the water, which, you know, that's what it's all about, right? Anyways, but
sure,
yeah.
So it made all the way over to Florida. I mean, apparently it came in from Hawaii in about 2004 or 5. Is that correct? And to California, I think.
Yeah, you know, I would be interested. I haven't seen anyone do like a concise history of like exactly which, you know, the exact timeline. I would like to see that, but it was more or less that, I guess. Like Surf Tech had the Laird Hamilton, I think it was like 12-1. Might have been like the first factory available board, but certainly people have been stand-up paddling for much longer than that. But as far as like launching it into the quote mainstream, and which is really when boards were starting to be mass produced. But yeah, there was Sean Ordonez, which was a Hawaii shaper. He's still a shaper. A lot of the guys that surf Jaws ride the boards, and they were like his first batch of manufactured boards from Asia, and those were the ones that we had two of them. That was the first board that I ever paddled on.
Wow, so you really got in right at the start. Huh? But you were born and bred in San Diego. What sports were you into growing up?
No, I actually grew up outside of Atlanta, Georgia. And,
sorry.
I was no worries. I was landlocked, and I was very much into basketball. I didn't really do any water sports at all. I played basketball. Played a lot of sports when I was little, but then as I got to like middle school and high school, it was all basketball and pretty competitively. And I played my first 2 years in university, and that was sort of my upbringing, my competition background, and that's really what I lived and breathed, the sport. And then when I was I think during my freshman year in university, I got into kiteboarding just because I was getting a bit bored with basketball and kind of burned out. And our school was on the water, and my neighbors were getting into, they were taking lessons. And for whatever reason, I sort of sprung at the chance to try it. And I was hooked, kind of the same way people listening might be able to relate to getting hooked on stand-up.
Yeah, I can relate. I can relate to that.
yeah. I mean, I was very much hooked on kiteboarding, and that and like I previously described, that's kind of what led me to stand-up paddling.
Mm-hmm. But so no NBA dreams then?
Yeah, no, I definitely wanted to play. The NBA is extremely competitive. I mean, literally the odds are about 1 in, I think, 2 million or something, like, because so I was realistic, and I wanted to play internationally in Europe. It was a little bit still an elite level, but a little bit more realistic. My dad played professionally in Germany, so that was sort of my dream, was to play professional basketball in Europe and travel, and but yeah, and then I got a little burned out, but more than that, I sort of found a new passion in kiteboarding, and that sort of led me in a new direction.
Okay, and I just saw on your bio on your website there was a thing called Water Monkey. Is that something you set up?
Yeah. So Water Monkey still exists. My now she's my wife, but at the time girlfriend. We started Water Monkey almost 6 years ago, and that was sort of so like after I graduated from university in St. Pete. I always liked working for myself and being an entrepreneur, and I was teaching kiteboarding. And I needed to work. I was out of school and I needed to figure things out. So we started Water Monkey as a lesson and rental and tour business for stand-up paddling. And I was the main instructor for like the first 3.5 years. Just me and my wife running it. And we'd also put on events and races. So I think in total we've done about 14 so far. But yeah, Water Monkey's still going.
Oh, cool. And you're still a part of it and quite active in it.
Yeah, so now we live out in San Diego. We moved here a little over a year ago, last February, but we still have the business. We have 2 instructors and still, deal with kind of the day-to-day operations. It's mostly online, so it's easy to work from here and do that. And we go back to St. Pete. In fact, I'm going next week, but probably three or four times a year that we're back there.
Okay, and is that St. Petersburg?
Yep, St. Petersburg.
Oh, right near Tampa, if I'm correct.
Tampa, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I drove through there quite a few years ago, actually, on a bit of fun.
Yeah, it's a great place.
Yeah, it's great. Pensacola, all that down the Panhandle. It's a good place.
Yeah.
So you're talking about traveling. You've traveled a fair bit. What are your memories of South Africa like?
Yeah, so that was a nice change because I have traveled a fair bit with stand up, and that's one of the things I'm most thankful for the sport. I love to compete, but I think I definitely am a competitive person, but I think the travel and seeing new places is like sort of the ultimate goal for me. And then competing's like almost just icing on the cake. But so South Africa was nice because it was kind of the first time in the last 4 years that I've traveled, and it hasn't been for competition, which it's funny to say. I've been to some great places competing, but you still are sort of focused on the race, and it's not like a vacation so much. It's still great, but South Africa was up for our honeymoon, and it was amazing. Beautiful country.
So was it just zero stress and just relaxation?
Yeah,
Did you paddle at all for fun or not?
So I actually raced the day before our wedding in St. Pete. We got married in St. Pete, and there was a race. We got married on Sunday, and there was a race on Saturday, and it was a race that, like, if I raced and placed third or better, I would have won like the series, and I won $5,000. So I was like, it was kind of a no-brainer, and so I did the race, and that was the last time I raced or paddled for like a little over a month. And then when we got to Cape Town, they had the weekly, I think Wednesday evening downwinder. So I had messaged in advance friend Dylan, the South African paddler, and his dad hooked me up with a board, and I did the downwinder, and I have to say I was pretty out of shape, but it was more just a cruise, and it was beautiful. It was blowing almost 40, and Table Mountains in the background. So I highly recommend that.
The wind can really blow in Cape Town. I tell you, it's unbelievable, as you obviously know. Huh? So 40 knots in Table Bay. Where did you start? Do you remember?
It's the lighthouse. What's the lighthouse?
Molly Point?
Yeah.
Could have been Molly Point, yeah.
Yeah.
And you went all the way down to Bloberg Strand or something like that?
Big Bay, where it's called Big Bay, right? The kiteboarding?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big Bay,
yeah.
Bloberg Strand, yeah.
That's where we...
Geez, that's quite a distance, huh? It's quite a fair distance.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Make sure you don't hit Robben Island on the way.
Guys said they paddle out and around it a few times.
Yeah, I think it's only about 10 to 15 kilometers offshore.
Yeah.
A friend of mine just swam it. Crazy guy.
Jeez, and the water's pretty chilly.
Yeah. So where else in South Africa did you go? Did you get up to the bush, and did you see any lions and leopards in the standard Big Five?
We did, and that, I have to say, was kind of the most memorable part. We flew into Johannesburg and drove to Kruger National Park and spent about a week and a half in there. And I don't know if you've been there, but it's so cool.
I sure have.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I worked there for 2 years.
No
I was
way.
actually a game ranger.
That's so
it was great.
Cool. On which rest camp?
It's called Singita. You can get to it on singita.com. It's an exclusive private game reserve just off the western coast. Yeah. But it's all still connected to the Kruger National Park, and it's just waking up at 4 a.m. and listening to the lions roar. It's just every day. Fantastic.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, we kept saying I could spend an extended period of time just living in the park for sure. So maybe I'll have to be a game ranger next time.
Yeah, absolutely. But hopping over to Europe, I saw something about you winning a huge mug of beer. Do you recall anything like that?
Yeah, that was awesome. That was the first Lost Mills event. That would have been 2012, I believe. And Erdinger, which is like the world's oldest wheat brewery. They're still the sponsor of the event, and they gave me, I think it was a 3-liter mug for winning, and it was alcohol free because that's like their thing that they're alcohol free beer. But yeah, and that event is cool. I mean, I'm excited to go back there in June for the 4th year in a row, and it's a cool vibe, and it's funny. It's like it's become, I mean, the most competitive flat water race in the world, and it's like in the middle of Bavaria and some like random little town that's super sleepy, not a lot of people there, and then here you have a handful of the world's best paddlers coming in. It's kind of a unique sort of thing, and I always enjoy going back.
That's crazy. Isn't it like a two-leg thing where you have to run across, in between the middle of the race, you have to run across a spit of land? Is that correct? Or have I got the wrong way?
It's two man-made lakes. So it's called the Lost Mills because there's 12, I believe it's like grain mills that are underneath the lakes, because it was a valley, like a tiny valley that was flooded to form the lakes. And there's a dam in between, and you have to do a portage. It's the only race I've ever had to do a portage too, which is it's kind of a
bizarre.
Yeah, it's cool. It's kind of a unique aspect to the event, and yeah, I highly recommend anyone in Europe or elsewhere checking it out.
Great. So when is that? Do you know, more or less?
First weekend of June.
Okay, right in the middle of summer, almost.
Yeah.
Well, beginning of summer. Huh?
Yeah. It, still kind of, in the years past, it's been a bit chilly, depending on your standards, but it's been super nice as well. So definitely one of my favorite events.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about racing. Are you racing full time?
Yeah, so not really. I mean, so I assume you're talking about like as a career sort of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's kind of a misconception with the sport in general. Like, I am a quote professional, and I guess, well, what does that mean? I have a board sponsor that pays my expenses to go to events, and I get boards, but outside of that, I'm not, my main source of income and everything is from my business and other things, and that goes for most guys. Pretty much everyone I know has a quote real job. We always like to say, it's like paddling is great, but there are some guys, I guess, making a living from it, but a lot of times they're the younger guys that don't have.
I mean, I guess guys like Kai Lenny and people like that, huh?
Well, Kai Lenny, and that's about it. I mean, Kai, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying, I think it's great what Kai does, but he's kind of on another planet in regards to the quote professional paddler. A lot of times his name comes up. Like I just saw, he's sponsored by Tag, the watch company, and Hurley and GoPro and Red Bull. I mean, yeah, no one else has those sponsors, and no one else, and Kai doesn't have those sponsors from paddling only. He has it from his whole quote waterman deal. He's a surfer, kiter, and paddler, and so it's kind of, I don't want to say it's not frustrating, but when someone says, "Oh, well, Kai," like he's, like I said,
I guess he's
kind of on
more
another
celebrity
planet
now, isn't he? Yeah.
Well, he's
sure.
that,
Yeah,
but not even. I mean, he's one of the best paddlers, but as far as using him as sort of a model of the professional paddler is grossly, inadequate, because it's just not. You know what I mean? Like, he's sponsored for everything else.
Sure.
And like the next guy, if you want to, it would be interesting to do earnings, but pretty much I know everyone personally. I know what I get. I know what everyone else gets. And most everyone's primary sponsor is the board company, and the board company's pretty much every deal, depending on who you are, is for expenses, but you're not actually making a salary. You're not making money. And look, I'm not complaining. I really enjoy what it's done for me, and I will continue to. But it's not a career path. To be a professional paddler.
Sure, but as the sport evolves, do you see how far off do you reckon salaried professionals would be?
I keep wondering, because I'm trying to stick in there until I can ink my major deal. I'm just kidding. But no,
Uh,
I don't know. I don't think it's anytime soon. If that, I think, you know, if you look at, a lot of people are like, oh, well, when SUP gets in the Olympics and this and that, it doesn't really mean anything. Like, one of my sponsors is QuickBlade, and Jim Terrell was a four-time, I believe, Olympian in the canoe, and he never made a living from that. And now that's different. There were certainly a lot of people doing, canoe in the '80s. But I remember him saying, he was working full time, and doing that on the side. And I honestly don't think that there's a career in the foreseeable future for just being a professional stand-up paddler. Um,
Surely television will change everything. I mean, I remember seeing last year there was quite a huge big show, and what was that? What was that race called? And it was aired live on CBS or something.
yeah, there was the Ultimate SUP Showdown, and that was on CBS. And I'm doing Pay at River Games, which is going to be on the same network, coming up in June. Yeah, I mean, look, that helps, but when you're on TV, that's good but you still have to get the sponsors, and that just makes you more appealing to say, let's just say Red Bull to sponsor you or someone else, because now they're going to get exposure. But the reality is one show once a year, or even two or three. I think the numbers as far as the viewers was small. I watched the production. It was, it is what it is. But I try to be realistic with everything I do, and I think I'm pretty well informed. Look, I hope that there can be a path for kids and, guys coming up, or, even myself. But having been doing it for 5 years and being sort of well informed and in it, to make, let's say, a teacher's salary, which is like $35,000 here in the States, which should be more, but let's say that, like, salary. I'm not, it's one thing to have expenses, but if someone's paying you to go to these places, well, that pays for your travel. But at the end of the day, if you have a rent and a car payment and that, well, that's on you. So talking about like salary on top of that, I don't see that happening, not for more than 5 guys
Sure.
in the foreseeable future. I mean, that's just being realistic about it.
Okay. And who have your major sponsors been over the past few years?
Yeah, so when I first got into to stand-up paddling, it was Fanatic was my board sponsor, and QuickBlade Paddles are pretty much my two, they were my main sponsors. And now it's, as of last year, I'm with BIC for my board sponsor, and really happy about that. And still with QuickBlade. And then I have a bunch of smaller sponsors, Runa Energy Drink, or it's a tea company. That's pretty cool what they're doing. But my only, the only one really paying for me to get to events and stuff is BIC, and before that it was Fanatic. So, like I said, and I'm not trying to be like a downer or anything, but like you see these guys and girls at events, and they got all these stickers on their boards, and they're thanking like 10 of their sponsors. But the reality is that, okay, like free sunglasses and sandals and sunscreen is great when you're 15 years old, but it's not like we're collecting checks from like a surfer who has sponsors on their boards. A lot of times they're getting some sort of funding from them.
Sure. Okay. So I would love to know why did you switch from Fanatic to BIC SUP? Was that not a good question?
That's a great question. Yes, it was kind of just good timing. I had been with Fanatic for like almost, like 4 years, and it was the only company I've ever been with. And I sort of was used to how things were going, and I could see into the future. It's kind of like if you can't teach an old dog new tricks, so you know what to expect. And there wasn't a whole lot of room for growth, and I am sort of looking for that career path. And Bick at the same time sort of approached me and was interested in adding a international rider, and it was just good timing, and there was a little bit more opportunity to work with Bick more in a higher capacity than just as a athlete. And like I said, just the career path of a professional athlete is not really there. So I'm thinking a little bit more long term and bigger picture with helping on as in a formal position with R&D and product development and things like that.
Okay, great. Yeah, because they seem to be a really dynamic company. They're putting out some great content. I see some fantastic videos of them in Tahiti, and the stand-up paddle TV series it seems to be run by them. I think it's great.
Yeah.
It really helps promote the sport, I think.
Yeah, they do that, and they're a big company as far as internationally and what they do with not necessarily race boards, but just the entry-level boards. There's quite a lot, so definitely there's room to grow there.
Sure. Okay, now here's a question. Imagine our listeners are non-racers. Can you describe what it's like out there in the chop leading the draft train in a race?
Leading it.
Yeah, well,
leading it.
You were leading it. You in the Carolinas Cup. You were leading a draft train, weren't you?
Yeah. Not the entire race. I like to be leading the whole pack, but yeah, I've definitely been in the front. And it's fun. So to someone that's never raced, it's you're tired, but it's a psychological game out there, and a lot of endurance sports. It's you have people behind you if you're leading the train, and that they want to get in front of you, so you're pacing yourself. It's about being smart. So there's a lot of times in a race where I could go faster, but I choose not to because I know, I'm timing the duration of the race and what I need to save, to be able to either catch the group in front of me or to beat the guys that are behind me who are inevitably going to try to pass me. So you kind of have like this feeling of anticipation and you're sort of planning ahead, and that's a fun sort of game that I like to play.
And do the guys hassle each other? Do you verbally chat to each other on the race?
I wish there was more. Coming from basketball, there's a fair amount of trash talking in basketball, depending on the game and stuff. And I wasn't a big trash talker, but I certainly. I like it's more physical, obviously, and there's not a lot of talking, in draft trains, guys are pretty quiet. I think I'm definitely usually the most verbal one, where if someone's in front of me, I'm usually giving them encouragement, like, let's go, push the pace. If we're in a draft train trying to catch someone in front of us, that's when I'm definitely doing that. And that has a psychological component too, because I want them to go fast to help pull me up to that draft train, because it's going to benefit me. But I also plan to pass that person that's pulling me up there.
Once you've worn them out, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously with sportsman-like intentions, but that's sort of, I find I'll share this with the listeners, a little inside gamesmanship, but a lot of times the younger guys are a lot easier to manipulate because they're trying to prove their quote manhood and pull the draft train and look how strong I am. And so I'll definitely give encouragement, like, hey, let's go, come on, let's catch them. And it's still sincere because I want to catch them, but I also, if they're a smart paddler, they may push the pace, but they're only going to do so to the extent that they understand that they're not going to wear themselves out. But
Sure.
yeah, I
But now
enjoy that.
the Battle of the Paddle sounds like a completely different race and really intense. How was your race in 2014? Because we had some super large waves, and
Yeah.
wasn't that correct?
Well, the elite race was, to put it lightly, it was pretty crap.
Oh, really?
I had so I was in the final, and I have some frustration with that race as an athlete. In my performance has not been what I wanted, but also from the race director side, as far as it's the biggest race in the world. It's our de facto world championship, but it's also one of the most poorly officiated races as far as organization on the start line. You have guys and girls just with no room, completely on top of each other. And I'm actually writing a post right now about. I've written posts in the past about how critical a start is, but so it's evident there. But it's basically like if you have any kind of race, if you look at swimming, running, horse racing, track and cars, the start is fair and separate and controlled, right? And the BOP in particular, and other races as well, it's a bit chaotic, and I think that's something. Personally, it's been quite frustrating, and then but then for the health of the sport and for all athletes, it's something that we need to fix. And so, anyways, with the BOP, because you have so many guys, all of those poor sort of circumstances are magnified, and you have just chaos and in my opinion, and look, they don't shy away from that. It's called the Battle of the Paddle, right? I mean,
yeah, I think the only word that came out of 2014 was carnage. I just saw the videos.
Yeah, and look, I think that's what they advertise, but the reality is it's sort of in this weird place where the event doesn't really ask for it to be called, to be put to the level that it is, but it's the world championship of our sport. I mean, I don't care what anyone says. Yeah, the ISA has their world championships coming up, but name the ISA winner from 2 years ago. Now name the BOP winner from 2 years ago, or the BOP has way more media coverage and weight, and it's our world championship. And then so for the world championship of any sport to be so chaotic and sort of like a free for all, I think it's crazy and it's quite frustrating.
Is this why you started the SUP Athletes Association, because of these issues in the sport that you'd like to rectify?
Yeah, I mean that's a good segue to it. I mean, basically, yeah. I mean that's what was happening is there would be, I've raced in pretty much every major international race and every major, domestic race here in the States over the last 5 years. And like the one theme at all of these events, besides all the good stuff, like, look, I'm not trying to be negative. I want to improve the sport, but there was always some issue and some sort of, whether it was someone illegally drafting or, someone didn't go around the right buoy or the prize money wasn't paid out. And it was just crazy. And at literally pretty much every event would have something. And the excuse was always, oh, well, the sport is young and this and that. And it's like, okay, well, 5, 6 years ago, you can say that. But even then, I didn't like that excuse. But now it's like, look, this is the 8th year of the BOP, and we're still, dealing with events that have, sort of things that I don't think should be acceptable for a sport. And the reason I don't think it's acceptable, and I'm a professional athlete, and so it comes loaded with my perspective, but I believe that this is important for someone that's even never raced before and is a beginner athlete, because everyone's time is invaluable. You can't put a price on it, right? So the time that someone takes out of their life to train for a race and to go and attend a race, you can't put a price tag on that. So when they go, a race director owes it to that person, whether they're a professional or it's their first race, to have a fair and clean and safe event. And I just don't, I think a lot of times that just gets overlooked because the sport is growing and everyone's just stoked to be there and all of that. And that's good. But I think, it's just as important to sort of recognize these issues and fix them, not to mention at the start of a race, boards are banging together. Someone spend, $3,000 on a board and their paddle. And to me, it's unacceptable.
So do you think you're making headway?
Yeah, I mean, that's, so basically the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
That's sort of what was happening before the Athletes Association in my own head. Was all these events had, there was the same issues, and we were having the same discussions between the athletes at the end of the event. Like, oh man, we got to fix this, and oh man, that was a terrible start, and blah blah blah. And so that's why I started it, or else I was going insane. And so since then, we've been in operation a little over a year. We have 40 certified race officials, actually 43 now, around the world, with the idea of, here I am. I don't want to sound like I'm just complaining about this. I want to do something about it, because there's a difference. Anyone can sort of sit there and run their mouth about how they don't like something, and politics or in life in general. But what are you doing to fix the situation? That's what I'd like to see. So that's why I created the Athletes Association, so that we could create a race official certification to pass this knowledge on to the race officials for how to properly execute a start, to how to make a race safe, so that we could give them the tools and the information to implement it and improve the sport.
But it must be an unbelievably difficult task to set up an association like this and try and bring in everybody, like the credibility of, because obviously everyone has to believe in it and adhere to the rules. And so if you've just been one short year and you've got 43 officials, and you're also, I think, am I correct in saying that the ISA has recognized you as well?
Yeah, so we're an officially recognized association by the ISA. What does that mean? I'll be completely honest, that doesn't really mean anything. but I'm continuing to work with them. They've adopted some of our rules unofficially, but I'm like any bureaucracy, like it's easier said than done, right? Than to implement something or to get formalized changes. But I've had countless meetings with the operations manager, which is a new guy, Liam Ferguson. I've had a few meetings with Fernando, and I've been in communication with him, the president. Fernando isn't so much involved in the day-to-day operations. He's more sort of the face of the organization, but he's still an important part. But they definitely recognize our input and understand that we know what we're talking about, and they want to work with us. But I'm continually trying to sort of formalize that, so that we can gain greater ground.
Okay, and you say us. How many people are there involved in the day-to-day running of what do you call it, SUPAA or SUP Athletes Association?
Yeah, SUPAA is an easier way to say it. Yeah, so. To be honest, we're not really making much money, so I can't really pay anyone. So I'm doing pretty much all of the day-to-day operations, as far as the website, social media, the articles, following up with the race directors, the race official certification courses. I did, and continue to do all of that. But I try to, to anyone listening, and I've made this clear from the beginning, I want as much involvement from as many paddlers as possible. But if I sat and waited around for someone else to do something, nothing would be done, because it's hard to do work for free, right? Everyone has their own things going on in their life. So I'm very much the one doing all, which is fine. I mean, that's the way I want it, not the way I want it, but I don't mind doing that. But I'm certainly constantly, on a daily basis in communication with other athletes, our advisory board, race directors, sponsors, brands, to sort of move forward in a unified direction.
Mm-hmm. But I think you released an ebook recently,
Yep.
And that could be a decent revenue stream. What is it all about, that ebook?
Yeah, so that was kind of the idea with that, is to take my knowledge of everything. The ebook is SUP Training the Smart Way, and it's like the encyclopedia of stand-up paddle racing and training. So it covers race strategy, technique, nutrition, specific race training workouts, interval sessions, cross training, nutrition, equipment selection, you name it, it's in there. And there's definitely a labor of love. It's 250 pages. And
wow, and you did that all yourself?
Yeah. And
that's immense, huh?
Yeah. And with the input and knowledge of other people, not just me, but coming from my perspective. And I'm pretty proud of it. I think anyone, I say that if you don't like it or don't think it was valuable, we'll give you a full refund. So I'm very confident that whether you've been racing for 7 years and your name's Connor Baxter, all the way to someone that's never paddled before, there's value in there. I truly believe that. It was actually pretty cool last weekend at the Carolina Cup. I had a few of the top paddlers that were in the top 10 at that race, say to me that they've been reading not even the book, but the articles I've been posting. They're like, yeah, I really like those. There were some things I learned, some new things, and that feels good. And I've had that from beginners too, and it feels good because ultimately I want to help improve people's experience from everything I'm doing through SUPAA, and also this ebook is just sort of another tool to help stand-up paddle athletes.
Yeah, I think it's totally valuable. I'm a member of your email address, your email list as well, and I found it amazing that somebody's writing that stuff, which is great. And it's also very well written. So
cool. Thanks
for that. Yeah. Chase, you're a keen promoter of SUP, but you're also a SUP superhero. So how can normal people like us help to promote the sport? Just any tips and ideas for normal people to help promote the sport?
I don't think of myself as a superhero, but I'll take it. Yeah, I think just get your friends and family out on boards. That's sort of the way I started and with the sport and continue is just let them experience what we all experience, and then more than likely they're going to get hooked, and we have a new advocate for our sport, and it just multiplies. And I think get involved too, go out, support your local race, tell them about the Athletes Association, check out everything that we're doing on SUPathletes.com. And, not everyone, some people might just go out and paddle in the lake behind their house and they could care less about, local race. And that's fine. I think that's what's the beauty of our sport is has such a huge range of participants and applications. But yeah, I just say get out there.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks, Chase. It's been fantastic chatting to you. We really, really enjoyed this talk. And where could people find you online? This is the last question.
Yeah. So check out SUPathletes, plural.com. And then my personal website is Chase Kosterlitz, KOSTERLITZ.com. And shoot me an email, and always happy to chat.
Great. Well, thanks again for coming on. It's been awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to SUP FM, the #1 podcast for stand-up paddlers wherever you are. If you like what you've heard, please leave us a review on iTunes. Until then, we'll see you in the water.